Okay. So now that we're recording, this is my favorite part, this little beginning, because for the people that don't watch live, they know that there's something that happens a few minutes early. For those of you watching the recording, we just got done saying something very, very special. So that's why you want to be on these things live. That's just so messed up of me, right? Just ultimate FOMO. I don't care. It's just fun. All right. So, oh man, if you're not having fun, right? If you're not having fun. All right. So I wanted to do a little bit of a different type of call with you all this evening, and we'll just go up to the hour like we always do. And here's what I want you to think about. So oftentimes, when it comes to heading into a new year, you talk about new goals, new metrics, new bonuses that you want to hit, ranks that you want to achieve, numbers of people that you want to enroll, things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. And I encourage you to do that. But tonight, I want to do a slightly different type of uh, intention setting strategy, if you will, as we turn the page. And I'm really not a big, oh, it's a new year type person. To me, it's a date on the calendar. It's going to be, tomorrow's Monday and we just move on, right? We just keep things moving. But I do also understand inherently that the nature of 2020 going into 2021 is unique for a variety of reasons, of course, because you're experiencing unique events in our lives. And so it gives us the opportunity to really reflect and to pause and to kind of start to consider what meaning we will start to subscribe to the year of 2020. Because I think we can all agree that for the rest of our lives, 2020 will have meant something to each of us in a very, very different way. And we'll all give some kind of massive meaning to this year. Now, some of us and some of you, and actually my bet is 100% of us, in due time, and it might be a year from now, 5 years from now, it might be 10 years from now, you'll reflect, and for some reason or another, 2020 will end up being one of the most important years of our lives. Something will come out of this. And that's what I've learned to be true about life, is that rarely in our darkest moments are we aware of what gifts or lessons are coming to fruition. It's not until down the road when we incur a different experience or a different event in our lives where we're able to kind of look back and go, okay, now I can appreciate why that happened in my life. It doesn't mean you have to be happy about it today, but it certainly allows us to sit in a space of perspective. And we don't have to wait to do that either. And so, what I want to talk about tonight is kind of, again, like I said, a different type of goal setting consideration. So, 2020 brought a lot of things to the forefront on a personal level for all of us. And it started to expose us to areas of our life where maybe we get to do some cleanup work, right? So for people that had small businesses, for example, that were, retail only, right? In a business context, retail business owners, they got hit with a very, very real realization that solely depending on a physical location for their business was a fatal flaw, right? So anytime they'd ever turned down the idea of expanding into some sort of online way of doing business or distribution came back to hurt them significantly this year. That's an unfortunate thing, but it was an exposure that many business owners are now looking at and going, great, now I can pivot. On a personal level, we saw relationships that took a different turn because of people's different belief systems and values and things like that. And that's the nature of discord and chaos as well. And then, of course, when it came to all kinds of different social considerations, political considerations. We saw so many different things happen in the world and in the United States and Canada, of course. So what I want you to do is I want you to consider what it might look like to do a year in review, but not necessarily in the normal contexts that we would when it comes to a business conversation. Because more often than not, what we would do as business owners, and Eden and I will still do this, and I encourage you to do the same, is we'll take a look back, right? We'll take a look back at, okay, what happened in my business? Where's my business at today from where I started? For those of you that are new, you can still incorporate the parts that Isagenix has contributed to your life, even if it's just been a month or a couple of months. You can consider what the side hustle has allowed you to experience from a financial perspective. But in order to move forward, oftentimes we've got to look back. Drop a one in the chat box. How many of you would agree with that? That sometimes in order for us to move forward, we've got to look back, right? And I think that what 2020, at least for me anyway, gave me the opportunity to do is to ask myself some new questions. And what I've learned from Tony Robbins and from other mentors of mine is that the power of our the quality of our life is in direct relationship to the power and quality of the questions that we're willing to ask ourselves. And so what I bet you that you have an opportunity to really reflect on this past year and come to some new levels of awareness in your life and how you showed up that can really bring to the forefront some ways in which you have the opportunity to move into a new season of life in a whole new capacity. in a whole new beat, in a whole new way of how you show up in the world and who you're being in the world and who you choose to be in the world. You know, one of the things my mom taught me a long time ago, and my mom's one of my greatest mentors, if not my greatest mentor, is she said, Zach, without self-reflection, there can be no progress. Without self-reflection, there can be no progress. And so if we're unwilling to kind of take a look in the mirror, then we'll never really get a true understanding of what our essence is and what we have the ability to create moving forward. And so here's what I want you to start to ask yourself, and you can do this tomorrow morning, you can do it tonight if you feel like staying up a little bit after the call, is I want you to start very wise mother. I want you to start to ask yourself some questions and reflection, because some of you this year struggled mightily from a mental health perspective, from an emotional well-being perspective. Some of you thrived this year. Some of you really just soared and killed it. And some of you maybe just don't know what happened this year. And you're still kind of looking around going like, is this thing over yet? And that's okay. No matter where you are on that scale, it's okay. But what I want you to start to do is I want you to start to ask yourself some empowering questions. Like, what can I be proud of this year? What can I be proud of this year? What are the choices that I made that were good, healthy choices? Where was a moment, just a moment, where I exhibited and exuded courage? What was a situation or an environment that I was in where I responded in a way that made me feel good about who I am? What relationships deepened this year because of the chaos and discord that we were experiencing? What were the relationships I was willing to move on from that I knew were no longer serving me and were no longer healthy? How many times this year did I exhibit love, compassion, and gratitude? How many times this year did I move forward with a positive attitude? Okay. Now, on the flip side, we've also got to ask ourselves some other questions, right? What are some of my moments that weren't my best moments in 2020? And this isn't to beat yourself up, by the way. Very, very, very important disclaimer. In fact, let me pull it back a moment. When you answer these questions for yourself, I want you to answer them as objectively as possible. I want you to do your best to remove yourself from the situation as though you were just witnessing a replay of the events that occurred. Drop a 2 in the chat box if you know what I'm talking about, if you know what I mean by that, okay? So it's like you're pushing pause, you're gonna replay to the beginning of 2020, and you're gonna watch it as if you were watching something on Netflix, a completely objective approach to this exercise. It's very, very important, completely objective approach, okay? Here's how objective I want you to be. Good answer, Antonio, I'm sure, okay? Here's how objective I want you to be. Some of you are parents on here, right? But all of us have been around children. So when you go into this next set of questions, I want you to come from the frame as though the answers that you get are being given to you by a 5-year-old or 6-year-old or 7-year-old little boy or little girl. Now, why would I invite you to take that perspective? Meaning you're going to ask difficult questions, but the answers you're going to receive are going to come from a little kid. Okay, right. They speak truth, they're unfiltered, but also what Antonio said. No matter what answer a child gave you, you're going to come back in a loving position. You're going to come back from a place of compassion. You're going to come back from a place of forgiveness. You're going to come back from a place of teaching. Okay. So when we're able to remove ourselves from a situation like that, and we're able to objectively counsel ourselves and process ourselves, that's where we become more empowered. So what were the moments in 2020 where I allowed my ego to be more powerful than my spirit? When were the moments when I allowed my ego to be more powerful than spirit? What was a moment where I was more committed to being right than I was committed to being loving? What was a moment where I was more committed to being right than I was to being loving? Were there any moments in 2020 where I was so blinded by ego that all I cared about was making somebody else wrong? Was there a moment where I was quick to judge? Was there a moment where I even privately, quietly, behind closed doors, when nobody was watching or nobody was listening, where I was vindictive or envious or jealous or angry or resentful, and I expressed that vehemently? Was there a moment that I did that? Was there a moment in 2020 where rather than choosing to love myself, I chose to beat myself up? Was there more than one? Was there a moment in 2020 where I chose to stay stuck as opposed to find ways to move forward? Was there a moment in 2020 where rather than leaning on my team and leaning on people that I know love me, I chose to hide instead, hoping that all the things would just usher themselves away? Was there a moment where I allowed negative thinking to be the driving force behind my actions? Was there a moment when I experienced that? Was there a moment where I could have done a better job at being responsive as opposed to being reactive? Was there a moment where I could have done a better job at being responsive versus being reactive? Was there a moment where I could have done a better job at true empathy, meaning a willingness to put myself in the shoes of other people to try and understand why they believe what they believe, regardless of my beliefs? Was there a moment where my actions led to greater discord than they did to harmony? I just want to check in with you all. Drop a 3 in the chat box right now if you're okay right now. Just drop a 3 in the chat box if you're okay. Okay with these questions, okay with bringing these things to the surface, okay that we're facilitating this kind of conversation in a business environment, okay? Just drop a 3 in there. If you're not okay, George, the emotional support dog, decided to run in the room right now to comfort all of you if need be. You're not okay. Okay. Again, we're looking at this objectively. We're talking with children. We're observing and teaching as if we were talking with children right now, okay? Because remember, again, with no self-reflection, there can be no progress. Was there a time when I looked at my cycles and they weren't where I thought they should be, and so I decided to beat myself up? Was there a time where I looked at my cycles and they were way higher than I'd ever expected them to be, and I convinced myself that they would stay there forever, and so I lost my way in terms of habits? The best part of this, by the way, the thing I love the most about this is seeing all of your involuntary reactions and facial expressions. By far the best part of this for me. And I just want you to know how much love I have in my heart for all of you, because I just get it. And because how is it that I'm able to ask these questions? How can I ask these questions? Because I ask these questions of me. Because this year, not only have I been there, I was there this year. There were moments when our business was going like this, spiking through the roof. There were times earlier in the year when our business was up 50 and 60% year over year from the year before. And my mind was going like this. Okay? So make no mistake that even as life highs can be riding like this, our mindset can play nasty, nasty tricks on us. But again, the power of our questions is going to determine the quality of our life. And so when we're willing to ask our questions and we're willing to reflect on some of these premises, we start to create new realities for ourselves. And our friend CG was here the other day, CG Siddons, and she said something so really important that she shares with her team all the time, and it relates to the context of this conversation. She said, I always remind my team to remember that the highest week in their business or month in their business is not a reflection of where their business is actually at. The lowest month in their business is not a reflection of where their business really is at. The real reflection of where their business is at is what it does on average consistently throughout the year. What does that have to do with the context of our conversation tonight? When you take a step back and when you evaluate and answer some of these questions, it's not about that peak moment in 2020. It's not about that rock bottom moment in 2020. It's about who were you consistently or as consistently as possible throughout the year, and how did you choose to approach one of the most chaotic, potentially disconnected, irrational, uncertain years of your entire life? Who did you choose to be within that framework, within that context, within the container that 2020 kind of created for all of us? And why does that matter moving into 2021? Well, the reason it matters moving into 2021 is because what I've been sharing very openly on my morning calls and with all of you since the beginning of this whole thing. I think we've got a little bit of a ways to go. I just do. I think we just got a little bit of ways to go. I see some of you nodding. It doesn't matter if you want it. It doesn't matter what our beliefs are on it, right? It doesn't matter. What matters is we might start a little bit. We might stop a little bit. They might open movie theaters. They might say, go back home. They might open restaurants. The restaurant owners might say they don't care. We just have to be in acceptance to some degree of what is so that we can find ourselves in terms of that. And the reason I bring that up for you and bring it to your awareness is so that you can reflect back and look at, okay, when it first all started to go down, how did I react? As I started to settle in, how did I respond? As things got into a heightened state of uncertainty once again, where did I go to? Did I go to fighting? Did I go to anger? Did I go to resentment? Did I go to agitation? What did I move to? And the reason that that's so incredibly important is because as you grow as a leader, and every single one of you on here has the great potential to be a leader as you grow in leadership. And leadership can mean a number of things. If you have children, you're certainly leading a family. If you're in a relationship, right, you're certainly leading in parallels in a relationship, okay? We all have experienced leadership in some kind of capacity. But as we move into 2020 and 21, and we know that there's going to be volatility, and we know that there's going to be continued amounts of uncertainty, and you should own that, Gigi. As long as we know there's going to be continued amounts of uncertainty, what happens when someone like you who's reflected on 2020 and chooses a new way of being in 2021, what happens for you and the people around you? Do you think it unifies or do you think it disconnects? What do you think will happen? When you reflect, when you answer some of those tougher questions, when you identify what your consistent disposition was, as you move into 2021, what happens? Correct. You create space. You create space. When did I play the blame game? When was I skirting responsibility? When was I critical of other people? How much time did I spend in comparison mode? How many times when I was on a team call and I heard Zach or Eden say something, I would just roll my eyes because I've heard it all before. I'm not saying that about me. That's not about me saying that. It's just that I know what it feels like to be on these calls and have someone like me talking and me being in a tough spot in my life and being like, oh my God, shut up. I don't want to hear this again. I get it. But I also know that was me fighting to be right. Who have you shut out in your life? Who'd you stop listening to? Did you stop listening to yourself? Did you stop trusting your intuition? When did that moment happen for you? Were there moments when you were ready to quit the business? Were there moments when you weren't ready to quit the business? Some of you say no. The rest of you are being honest. And the reason I know that is because guess what? Even there have been times where I've wanted to quit the business. So it's okay to feel what you felt. But to what degree do you want to move forward in 2021 is the big question you've got to ask yourself. And so the last question I'm going to ask you is this, and you might want to write this one down. What are the parts of me I'm willing to let go of in order to move forward? What are the parts of me I'm willing to let go of in order to move forward? Let me rephrase the question because that's not a fair question. That's a setup question. It's not a fair question to you. It's not a fair question to me. What are the parts of me I'm willing to work towards letting go of? That's an important little distinction because it means it's in our control, but it means it's also not going to happen overnight because it doesn't happen overnight. Here's what I can tell you that I know about all of you because I've watched it. You created more this year than you realize. You've been more impactful in people's lives than you give yourself credit for. You've created more of a ripple effect in your communities than you've even considered just by saying yes to this opportunity. Even if you've only enrolled one person, no people in the entire time since you've been here before, you started to create space for possibility of transformation in your world. What I've watched this team do between this group here and all of our partners in Europe was inspire an entire company to know it was possible in uncertain times because of your leadership, because of your choices, because of the way you leaned in. So I hope that when you answer that question tonight or tomorrow morning of what's something I can be proud of, I hope you write down, I'm proud of myself for leaning in. I hope you write down that you're proud of yourself for sticking this thing out, regardless of how uncertain and crazy some of these times have been for everybody. I hope you're willing to acknowledge the strength and the courage it takes to wake up and put on your shoes and pants every single morning in this world sometimes, because it can be extremely challenging. I hope you take a moment to realize how many odds you've already overcome and what that means and how well that equips you to overcome future odds. Thank you for that, Antonio.
Oh, wow.
I hope you take a moment. I really do. I hope you take a moment to give yourself a pat on the back. I hope you take a moment to realize and recognize that you're part of a community that is sitting here praying for you, rooting for you, empowering you, and holding so much space for you to create whatever it is that you want to create. Big, small, however you define it, totally up to you. I hope you take a moment to reflect and know that you have partners in Eden and I that are ridiculously proud of you, for every single one of you, no matter how many people you've ever enrolled, no matter if you've rank advanced or not, we could care less. We're grateful for your presence in our life. We're grateful that you said yes to yourselves. We're grateful that you show up on these Sunday night team calls. You don't realize that you're our teachers as much as, if not more so than we are yours. You don't realize that what we do every day is because of our inherent belief in your potentiality as a human being, in our belief in what you have the ability to create and inspire in the lives of other people. But in order to do that, you're going to get to draw that line down that piece of paper, answer those questions honestly, with love and with compassion in your heart, with nothing but a focus on forgiveness, gratitude, and compassion for yourself and for every other person that's come into your sphere of influence this year. So just take some time, self-reflect, take notice of what you have access to. And I'll just invite you to have a deeper sense of appreciation for what you have, because what I've learned in my life is that when we appreciate what we have appreciates. When we appreciate what we have appreciates. So one last time before we sign off for the year 2020 and whatever that means, again, I'm gonna say this loudly and clearly. Loudly and clearly. We're honored to be a part of this with you. We really are. It means a lot to us that you guys show up in the ways in which you do. And my biggest hope and my biggest prayer is that you choose to look in the mirror tonight before you go to bed and you see in you what we see in you. Have a great evening, everybody. Have a happy holiday, and sending all of our love. We'll see you guys soon. Good night, everybody.
Unit.